This is going to be a little more serious than I normally am. You may see me joking and laughing and doing things with my kids and doing the things that I enjoy as a person. There are other things that are kind of like behind the scenes that you guys really don't get to see, and that are really hard to discuss. Not because I don't think you'll get it, I don't think you'll understand, but because they're just so emotional and that they are just so draining. And I remember the day Lucy got approved for disability. She got approved on the first try. During the process, first of all, nobody ever told me how taxing it was emotionally and mentally and physically. You have to gather all of your paperwork, everything, anything and everything. Prescriptions, doctors, stuff from the school. You have to be very, very, very prepared going in to apply for disability. Not only the process of applying for disability, but the thought of your child being disabled. The term disability is such a heavy word, and it's so stereotyped. When you think of the term disability, what comes to mind? Older people, wheelchairs, sick people, people who can't function in society at all. And they deserve that money. They do. But also, there's sick kids who are disabled. There's younger adults who are disabled, who have invisible illnesses, who have autism like my daughters, who have epilepsy like my daughters, who struggle daily, but you can't physically see it unless you know the signs. The term disability is made to feel so ugly when you go to apply for these services. They make you feel this big, about the size of an ant, when you go to apply for these services that they basically shove down your throat for if you need any assistance. They shove these services down your throat. If you ever get disabled, if you ever get sick, and when I say sick, I mean a chronic condition that can last, for years or a lifetime. I don't mean like the flu or the cold or anything like that, obviously. They shove these programs, and I know you've probably seen the commercials. They air these commercials all the time. Disability lawyers, we'll fight for your case. Give us a call. But when you go to actually apply for any of these services, whatever services that you're using that are funded by the government, you're made to feel really small. And I don't know if it's because the representatives or the caseworkers have to disassociate themselves from the cases, so they show no emotion. And I remember going to apply for Lucy. It really was one of the hardest days of my life so far. And I know Lucy has a lot going on herself, but as a mother, hearing that your child is disabled and having the U.S. government agree with you the first time around, you go from like, yes, my child is getting heard and that my child is getting money that she could use to pay for services and whatever else she needs, to, oh, I must not be working enough to take care of her. I must not be working as hard as I think I am to take care of my children's needs. I struggled with that for a very long time. I struggled with the thought of being glad that she qualified for these services, to, oh, I don't work nearly enough, even though I'm tired and I'm not home, and my paychecks say that I work a lot of hours, but I must not be working enough for my daughter to qualify for these services. It makes you feel this big. I remember the day Lucy was diagnosed with autism. I remember that so clearly. I remember first came the epilepsy diagnosis. We knew she was having seizures almost immediately. That was never a problem to get diagnosed. The staring spells, the convulsions, we knew something wasn't right. Oh yeah, your daughter's having seizures. We're going to send you to a neurologist. We're going to get an EEG. We're going to, get help. And I was like, okay. I know lots of people who have seizures. It can be controlled, no problem. And then about a week later, we go get an MCHAT screening because she was about 2.5. And I remember that day so clearly. It was warm, it was sunny. The doctor's office has lavender around the building, and you can smell lavender. But I just knew something in my heart, something wasn't right. I knew in my soul something wasn't right. So the doctor approached me and said, "Ma'am, have you ever heard of the autism spectrum?" And I said, "I've heard of it, but I'm not exactly sure what it is." And it took me a few seconds to kind of realize the direction of the approach of the conversation, that he was diagnosing my child on the autism spectrum. It caught me off guard, because when you think of being disabled, you don't think of kids like I have, who don't appear to be disabled, who are so smart and gifted, who have empathy beyond belief. I don't remember her exact score for the scale, and it's an actual scale, by the way. When they say autism scale, it's an actual scale that the pediatricians have to measure what side of the spectrum your child may be on. Well, it's in my professional opinion that your daughter has autism, and we're going to get you guys the help you need for this, because it's going to be a long road. Doing it for your own child just kind of makes it a little more real. I remember thinking, okay, now what? What are our next steps? And it kind of took my breath away, because I didn't know how to approach this. I didn't know anything about this at this point. I've became so well versed and so acknowledged on how to handle my daughter's cases, on how to fight disability cases, on how to deal with therapists and teachers and IEPs and 504s. I've gone from, in a good 8 years, I've learned so much. Lucy will be 10 this winter. So in a good 8 years, I've learned so much so quickly. So they said, well, first of all, we're going to give you in-home services, because sociably, she's not speaking. Lucy didn't speak for a long time. She would scream and constantly scream and scream and scream, because that's how she would communicate. She didn't know how to talk, which is kind of weird now. And it's weird saying that now, because you see her on my videos. She talks, but when she talks, she's very articulate and she's very smart, and it's all about science or math or building these huge, gigantic monasteries in Minecraft. Okay, it's amazing to hear this kid speak. And they said, "Ma'am, your kid is nonverbal. She's not speaking, but she's showing signs of high intelligence in other areas. So what we're going to do, we're going to get you in-home help. We're going to get you therapist. We're going to get you anything that you ever need." Once you get the diagnosis of autism, it became easier to handle her needs. Getting the diagnosis was what took forever, because between the ages of 1 and 2, we knew something was wrong. We knew something was wrong, we just couldn't put our fingers on it. And between the ages of 2 and 3, they do the MCHAT screening to make sure your kid is meeting all of their milestones. But Lucy wasn't speaking, which I addressed that. I remember addressing that beforehand at her checkups. I was like, she's not talking, she's not putting her sentences together. And I've had a 2-year-old before. Lucy's older sister, Jana. I've had a 2-year-old before. So I kind of know how 2-year-olds are supposed to behave. I kind of know they're supposed to be learning, they're supposed to be talking. they're supposed to be being a 2-year-old. She was babbling and screaming and hiding, hitting her head off the floors and walls. And I know that sounds horrible, and I don't mean to paint my child in that light. I'm just trying to give you an example and a time frame of how this was handled and where this is going. So when she was 2, she was showing signs of autism. Big, flashing red stoplight signs that she has autism. So we finally get that diagnosis. We finally get that diagnosis after we get the diagnosis of epilepsy. I felt relieved, and I also felt heavy at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense or not. You feel relieved because people are finally seeing what you're seeing. They're finally getting it. They're finally starting to understand. And they're finally starting to say, oh, okay, you're as a mom, you're right. We need to handle this as soon as possible. So you feel validated. But at the same time, you feel heavy because you know there's a long road coming on. You know it's going to be a long journey. They gave us everything they possibly could as regarding a therapist. We got a program called Easter Seals that would come out a couple times a week to help her gain social skills. She got physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. She got a 504 and an IEP. She got everything. And even today, she still has these services in school just to make sure she doesn't slide back. Between the ages of 4 and 6, her speech started to pick up. She was placed in Head Start at the age of 4 years old, where Annie is now, and her speech picked up immediately. Her speech picked up, but it wasn't normal speech. It was backward speech. It was backward speech. It was like she would, like, I want the yellow banana. She would say, I want the banana yellow. We understood. We finally understood what she was saying. And it began to actually break through a little bit. And she still does this to this day. She'll still kind of reverse the nouns backwards a little bit. She'll still kind of reverse her nouns. Like, I like the blue shirt you just bought me. I like the shirt blue you just bought me. You know, it's stuff like that. She has actually come such a long way. And I remember getting the diagnosis for Annie. With Annie, I knew the signs immediately because we had to follow through with Lucy. You know the signs, you know the symptoms. It took me a long time to come to terms with having 2 special needs kids in the house. And it's not that I don't love my daughters. I don't want to paint that picture at all for you guys. I love my daughters with every breath in my body. Having 2 special needs children in your house, it can be overwhelming. You have to go through the process of applying for services and applying for help all over again. This time, I knew what I was getting into. This time, I was familiar with all the paperwork, and there's tons of paperwork. If somebody would have just sat me down and told me what a long journey this would be, just with the paperwork alone, that would have just maybe calmed my nerves just a little bit. Paperwork and the therapist and the doctors. Annie and Lucy were seen by 2 separate psychiatrists, okay? But the same neurologist. They kind of communicated back and forth. And getting the diagnosis for Annie, it was different because Lucy and Annie operate on 2 different levels. When they say autism is different for different kids, they're absolutely right. Lucy functions at a more scientific level, where Annie functions at a more physical level. She has to touch and smell everything before she actually does it. Lucy likes to tear things apart and see how it works. There's a program she likes to watch. I should have caught this on camera. There's a program she likes to watch. It's called NASA Weekly, and it's on the NASA channel. It's so cool. But I'm getting off the tracks here. But they operate differently on different levels. Neither of them seem like they would have any issues. Ooh, you're in for a rude awakening if you think my kids don't have any kind of issues at hand. the meltdowns, the spinning that Annie will still spin when she's overwhelmed. Lucy will still have fits of rage when she doesn't understand something because she thinks she's smart enough to understand. And it's so overwhelming, sensory-wise, and she thinks she's smart enough to understand a lot of things, and she doesn't understand, and she has these fits of rage. I don't want to paint them in a negative light, so I'm trying to do this as lightheartedly as I can without saying anything bad about my kids, while trying to give you guys a better understanding about what's going on, because I don't think there's a lot of understanding when it comes to this. There's a lot of details involved, a lot of details that you guys just don't see because we're too busy, or Annie's screaming in the background, so I don't want to catch that, or Lucy's screaming because I don't want to catch that either. But filing disability for 2 kids, it's overwhelming. The paperwork is overwhelming. The representatives suck. I think they're just trained to make you feel this small, or maybe they're just trained to kind of disassociate themselves from everybody so they can get their jobs done. I remember filing for Annie, and the lady was so judgmental. She was like, "Oh, we already get it for this kid." And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am, I do. She has autism and epilepsy." I mean, her case file is right in front of your face. She has autism and epilepsy. And she's like, "Oh." And I remember coming back that day once again feeling that I didn't work enough. Once again feeling overwhelmed and depressed because there's so much on my shoulders. And I remember when it finally came in for Annie, I was so happy and so excited because once again she was being heard. But then once again I was feeling like, oh, well, I don't work enough. I don't work enough to support my kids' needs, which is why they get disability. And it took me a while to get over that. Oh, I don't work enough. I can't support my kids. I can't support my disabled kids. And I've recently come to terms with, I do work enough. I do work a lot. Just because my kids get extra funds does not make me worthless, does not make them worthless. I work so much. I feel it in my bones. I look at my hours on my paycheck. I work a lot. And it took me forever to get over that conflicting emotion between not feeling that I'm not good enough as a mom to feeling that, oh, well, I must be doing something right because my paychecks are pretty dang good, but at the same time, they still meet requirements for my children to get disability. So there's this fine line of emotion and a roller coaster, and a roller coaster of emotion that you're constantly on. And I wish somebody had told me about this. Not that my kids don't deserve it. I'm glad that they get it. Believe me, it comes in handy. All their specialists are out of town. All of their doctor's appointments are in Charlotte. And, oh my gosh. I'm not even going to touch on that subject right now. It's just too overwhelming. But it's about 6:30. Jaina is staying home. She has a fever and sore throat, so I just have to get Annie and Lucy awake and get them to school. I have a few minutes before I have to leave to take the kids to school. Applying for disability itself makes you feel like you're less than a person. Whether you're applying for your child or applying for yourself or applying for another adult in the household that you're the representative of, it carries a stigma and it carries a stereotype. It carries a stigma and it carries certain stereotypes. Here I am trying to do a serious video. It carries a certain stigma and a certain stereotype that makes you feel like you didn't do your part in society, or that makes you feel like you're not ready for it, or that there's more that you can do as being a part of your society. What you have to understand is that everybody's different. Everybody is going to have different needs. What you have to understand is that everybody is going to be different. Just because you have to apply for a service doesn't make you less human. It doesn't make you less worthy. It does not make you less of a person. I know you see people, because I see people all the time do this. I know you see people when they park in the handicap spot up front, but they get out and walk to the entrance. I see people judge them. And it's like, why? You don't know what's going on in their lives. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what kind of battle they're fighting. Maybe they're just having a really good day and are able to walk to the entrance that day. Maybe they're on their way to get a prescription if they're in like a superstore like Walmart or Publix or wherever, and they're on the way to the pharmacy. Maybe, just maybe, they're having a brief, good moment in that one day, and your judgmental attitude is going to squash it just like that. People are just way too judgmental. And each time you see this, I want you to stand up for people like this. I want you to say, hey, look, you don't know what's going on with them. You need to keep your mouth closed. You don't know what kind of battles they're fighting. You need to keep your mouth shut, because it's really none of your business anyway.